Hey everybody, it's Deanna Kosaraju, founder of Global Tech Women. I'm really excited about this session, and for people who are just waking up in India, this is a huge opportunity for you to see a global speaker. I am talking about Linda Bernardi. She is an author, technology provocateur, entrepreneur. She calls herself ex-CEO, but I'm going to say former CEO, and strategist, investor, lecturer, and board member. And anyone who's met Linda knows that she is a complete fireball. She is just an amazing force and energy. Every time I'm around her, I feel completely energized and ready to just take the earth by the horns and shake it. So I'm really excited about her session. We would really love you to be involved. If you want to chat, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you have any ideas that you want to share with us, please use the chat window on the right-hand side, and we would love to have your thoughts. So with that, I am handing it over to Linda. Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Deanna. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Deanna and Global Tech Women for arranging such a complicated talk that's virtual, that goes on for days. And to do that with the number of resources that Deanna has, my hat's off to you, because I think it's a remarkable amount of work. And I'd like to say hello to our global participants. I hope in the course of the discussions we will have in the next hour, we'll get to talk to each other, which is wonderful. And thank you, Deanna, for the introduction. My role, my passion in life is to drive disruption and innovation, in particular in large companies. My career from the beginning was with a think tank at BBN, where we designed things that didn't exist, where we changed the world and disrupted it. And throughout my career, that's been the pattern that I've really pursued. So when Deanna and I talked about what the session tonight would be, and as this is International Women's Day, I really thought about talking about one topic and sort of blending it into a larger number of topics that hopefully all of you will participate in. And that's around why women don't drive. Why don't we lead? Why are women more comfortable following a leader? And there are a lot of reasons for this. And in the course of the next hour, we'll explore some of these topics. There is a PowerPoint that in a bit I'll bring up, but one of the things that I did in the course of identifying these reasons and working through the resistances that a lot of women face is to write my book, which I have here, and you have the title. And we're going to reference some of these things, but I hope in the course of this discussion, more than anything, I hope that you will join me. Let's do this real in becoming a certified and official member of the culture of disruption. I hope, if you have not already done this, that you will give yourself the permission to disrupt, to break things in order to experiment, to see what's possible. And a lot of how we're going to connect driving leadership is going to be connecting it to this ability and desire to be okay with disrupting things, that disruption is good. And by the end of the talk, hopefully we'll put the pieces together. But to get started, let me sort of highlight a couple of points that are key in why women typically don't drive, why there's more of a comfort in following leaders as opposed to being the provocative driver. One of them is when you drive things, there is risk. There is risk, there is failure. You might want to do something that might fail. Leadership isn't about consensus. And females, we tend to want to make decisions more based on consensus as opposed to driving a decision forward. Now, that doesn't mean driving at any cost, but it does mean that at some point to be okay to drive our passion, what we firmly believe in, forward. Women will take things personally. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. Women leaders tend to want to be liked. It's a personal thing. And sometimes when you're driving in technology and leadership, it's not about driving things forward or getting people to like what you're saying necessarily, but it's having the ability to drive the process forward. It's not about being liked. It's, being okay with being considered crazy. When you go to drive a passion, a decision, there are going to be people, there are going to be a lot of them that are going to find you insane, your idea untested, unproven. There are going to be more doubters than supporters. There are going to be more people that are going to find you too determined, perhaps sometimes difficult. But all of these elements are things that go along with driving. And as a result, these are elements that women leaders sometimes have difficulty. And these are the elements that we need to overcome in order to be able to drive things forward. So with this opener in terms of driving versus disruption, let me, first of all, Charlotte, high five to you. I'm glad that you've been considered crazy. I think I'm considered crazy almost every day. And high five to that. Thank you for that comment. But first of all, at this stage in this general opening segment, let me open it up for questions, if you have any thoughts, etc. This is really about working together on this process. So I'll wait a second to see if any other comments pop through. I can respond to them as we go along. And in the interim, let me just mention that throughout my career, anything that I've embarked to do, whether it was starting my first company, my second company, whether it was writing a book around disruption as a necessity for innovation 2 years ago and having people tell me disruption is never going to work in companies, disruption is negative, yet it's probably disruptive innovation is the term that you now hear a lot. A question just came in: how do we deal with people thinking that you're crazy because you're not acting like a woman? That's a great question. I'm not sure what acting like a woman is, but what I do know is some of those obstacles that I mentioned at the beginning, the comfort, the confidence that a woman needs to have to be a driver in leadership as opposed to the follower. Honestly, we as women need to embrace this. We have to become comfortable with risk. And that's really what I would say is one of the necessities that we have to achieve in order to perhaps not be viewed like a woman. Honestly, women bring tremendous value to the table. The level of, in tech companies or in startups, the level of technical competence, brilliance, leadership capability, collaborative team building, the things that women have are phenomenal. They're out of this world. But if you actually think about it and say, okay, in the same companies or in the same startups, why is it that the role of VP of strategy for products is not held by a woman? Why is more than often the chief technology officer not a woman? Why is the head of products not a woman? That applies in big companies, so that's something we need to fix. We need to become comfortable in driving, in leading. And secondly, on the startup side, it is remarkable that we're actually missing women founders at a significant level. It's not because women aren't out there with incredible ideas, but we shy away from taking a position to go out there in the market and say, I have an idea of a product, and be okay with people saying that is insane. I don't believe it. And the other comment that just came through, yes, there are a lot of women that are in HR, that are in marketing, finance. Finance is extremely meticulous. Chief financial officers, tremendous number of them. Chief operating officer, a lot of them. But these positions, while they lead in what they do, this session is about why women aren't leading in tech. And Charlotte brings up, what are the strategies to get women into startups? One of the things is for women to just go into the startup. Some of the topics we're going to discuss here is about enabling and empowering women. I hope a lot more women will come and watch this because you have the capacity. As it turns out, the power to be the founder is also in the woman's hand because women are very bright. And Charlotte, you are a co-founder with All Men, and you haven't been able to attract women. This is very, very common. I did a study of my own. In addition, as we go along, I'll talk about the kind of things that I do, but for the last 6 years, I've also been investing in the tech sector globally. I'm right now probably the only non-Indian in the India Angel Network, as well as probably the only non-India woman in the network. But I can tell you, from Shanghai to Bangalore, from Tokyo to Berlin, to the US, to South America, to Africa, we simply don't have enough women. And it's not because women don't have the idea, but there's something about embracing risk that is very difficult for women. And part of it is how personally we take failure. When you become an entrepreneur, when you drive in leadership, there's a high likelihood of failure. That failure is not personal. It's part of the process. It's part of the learning as we go forward. If I meet a male entrepreneur with huge pride, they will tell me, my first 4 startups failed, but this one, man, it is going to take over the world. And they say it with such conviction, you can't but absolutely believe what they're saying. A woman, on the other hand, will drop their head, be very shy, and tell you, you know, it's really the other ones haven't worked. I'm not sure. I don't know if this is going to work. So that's what we need to overcome. Now, in order to overcome these obstacles, right? One of the biggest obstacles to women, or in general, that people, all of us have to face, male or female, is resistance to change. When you're driving something forward, the reason we're having this discussion is because driving forward is creating a disruption. It's a change. So Deanna, if I could ask you to pop the presentation on the screen where I can talk about Provoke. And I understand that you're going to need to move the slides on your end forward. But my book, Provoke, really talks about why the global culture of disruption is our hope for innovation. It ties disruption and innovation. There's a chapter dedicated to women entrepreneurs, and it talks about particularly confidence as the one element that we need to improve. And by the way, I should say that it's not that women don't have confidence. It's about how much of our confidence do we want to share. Now, if you would join me in going to slide number 2, you'll see that this has a little bit of my background, like my company. So let me talk to you about my own entrepreneurial experience in driving innovation. In 2001, I really felt that barcodes are becoming obsolete. In order to use a barcode to track anything, you have to wand it. There's no need for that because we can use passive RFID, we can put readers, we can have things automatically talk globally. There's no need for you to go to checkout and check your item out. It can be all automatically scanned, connected to your credit card. Well, that was a disruption, and my company, Connectera, was the first company to build that infrastructure to go and change the industry. And in the course of the 6 years, while we built the company, built the standards organization, successfully sold the company to BEA, right when BEA picked up Oracle, there were many lessons that I learned. So right now, my title is that of a provocateur, is what I'm known as. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that disruption, I'm on slide number 3, is not chaos, it's innovation. And if you go forward to slide number 5, I really like in The Power of Habit, a great book, where Charles talks about what is this habit loop, right? And one of the reasons that it's difficult to drive things is because you're asking people to change their habits. That's really the bottom line, right? You're making people uncomfortable because you're asking them to change how they're thinking. And if you go to slide number 6, and by the way, let me talk about the habit loop for a moment. In a habit, you have tasks, cues, signals, and when you do them in a routine, you get the job done. Turns out about 95% of our day is done by habits. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth the same way. You make your coffee the same way. In fact, you stop thinking about things. Habits facilitate life. They repeat. They're very known. You know what the outcome is. But there are real negatives to habits, because if we live our lives with habits and don't want to disrupt, we're actually never going to change. So if you go to slide number 6, in order to innovate, how do we innovate? How do we disrupt? How do we drive and change, right? So if you're Steve Jobs and you had absolutely believed that the music industry could never change, you would have never explored having a music store or think about how you're going to change the entire music industry. If you hadn't believed phones could change, you would have never thought of the iPhone. When you think of these changes, everything breaks apart, but you cannot innovate if habits and the cycles continue. And if you go to slide number 7, when you want to have these what ifs, You can't have what if, disruption, new ideas, new products, if you're going to do them the same way, because you'd be exactly like anybody else. So the question is, how do we achieve that? And if you go to slide 8, as it turns out, the bigger the habit loop, the stronger the resistance to disruption. That's why you see very few products introduced by very big companies. And you see a lot of more interesting products by startups, because in a startup, there is no habit. Everything is new. And resistance to disruption, as that goes up, as that resistance goes up, the rate of innovation goes down. So Deanna, can I ask you to pop off of the presentation? Because I just want, the presentation is actually superimposed on the chat space, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody's chat comment, and we come back to the presentation.
Okay, you can drag and drop the presentation down into another window. Like right
My
now, I
God,
have
you're a
it.
genius. You are a genius. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love her. I love her. Okay, all right. So, excellent. So if we now go to slide number 9, in order to innovate, we have to be comfortable breaking things apart and creating what's more of a, not a loop, but rather a ladder, things that change all the time. When you're driving, when you take a driver position in leadership, the people that you look at the industry, either in startups or major companies, the ones that you're thrilled by, these are people that are constantly changing things apart. When you're looking at Netflix and saying, why is a movie distribution company able to suddenly decide we're going to make movies and have it become so successful? And unlike everybody else, we're just going to stream it out in one day, and yeah, it's going to break broadband, but so be it. Let's try it out. And that was House of Cards. If you're Amazon and every day you're trying to throw something new out there, some will stick, some won't, but that's the only way we're going to drive them. So this is really about driving, but I did want to put slide number 10 in there, just food for thought, that there are two different mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And if I had to bet, a lot of times when we're dealing with individuals that have habit loops that are they're very difficult to deal with, and resistance, oftentimes they're very fixed mindsets. They believe if things are the way they are, and it's very difficult to change these individuals. And I'm not going to go through too much of a laborious session on this, other than I inserted a couple of slides. And if you'd like more information on this, please go ahead and look at my website, lindabernardi.com. On the home page, you will see BR, B for boy, R for Robert. That means book reviews. In the last 6 months, I've gone through and done about, I think, 14 book reviews of books that really bring these topics to the forefront that I can discuss with my clients for us to really actively change. So slides number 11 and 12, you can read them, but it's really about, if you have a fixed mindset, not only are you not going to change, but you're not going to allow others to change. So we started out in talking about, in order to innovate, and I'm on slide 13 now, we need to break this habit loop. The question is how, and that's really what Provoke is about. That's what my passion is working with big companies, startups, men, women, at every level, for us to work through the resistance. And as it turns out, over the years, and I'm on slide 14 now, we have identified there are really about 5 stages of resistance. And I want to walk through these with you. But before I do, for what I've discussed until now, let me open up the floor and see if there are any questions. Chime in if there are. Okay, excellent. So the very first stage of resistance, slide number 15, is anger and denial. Whether you're in a startup trying to go raise money, dealing with VCs or people around you, or you're a person in a big company and you have ideas, please be comfortable when you share your idea, when you go to drive and lead in what you're doing at whatever level that you're at, from a CEO all the way to all levels. The first reaction you're going to have from people is anger and denial. This is a very typical first stage of resistance, because you are disturbing somebody's comfort zone. When you go in and say, the way we've been doing something, maybe not the right way, I'm thinking of a totally different way to do something. The first reaction you're going to get is anger and denial. And I want you to be comfortable with that. Part of knowing how to maneuver, become better drivers, is understanding some of the techniques that you can use in driving that. So being prepared that that's going to be the reaction is technique number one. Because if you know somebody's going to react that way, you're already prepared, you're relaxed, you're not reacting, rather you're thinking. You know that's coming up, and you can use that opportunity to really help them see the bigger picture. Now, typically for women, the very first time, whether they're founders, they come for funding, or whether they're pushing their ideas and they're trying to drive and lead, when they encounter this resistance, often women will back off. Often they will take it personally. They feel that the person is reacting to them. They take it as a personal gesture, as opposed to a reaction on the part of the individual. So my recommendation is that you be prepared for this. This is a reaction like any other reaction. And to succeed and move ideas forward, you need to sort of work through this. And one way is to tell the individual, I know this isn't exactly what you thought, and I realize maybe you have some revenue concerns because I'm suggesting changing things, but let's look at some of the factors out there. Let's look at what our competition is doing. So it's your job to make the person comfortable, realizing that you are taking them outside of their comfort zone. I'm now on slide number 16. What happens after anger and denial? I want you to be ready for rejection. And rejection is the flat out, you take this idea forward, or you're presenting it to 30 VCs that have just rejected your idea, is that they're going to reject it. They're not rejecting you as a person. They're not rejecting you as an individual female. They're rejecting your idea. Sometimes they don't fully recognize what your idea is. Sometimes they think differently than you do. Sometimes they just don't simply believe that that idea had merit, right? So many of us entrepreneurs that have had companies, you start out getting rejected by a lot of VCs. But if every time you take it personally, you're never going to go to the next one, right? So what drives you, what makes you be the driver and be the leader is that comfort that this isn't personal. Yes, maybe it's 5 executives that I had to talk to push my idea. Maybe there's a 6th and 7th person I need to talk to. So again, the technique here is to not take the rejection as a personal rejection, rather something to go work on and move things forward. I'm moving to slide number 17. Typically, the next phase that happens is recognition. And by all means, if you go through Provoke, each one of these is an extensive chapter with examples that our time here won't permit. But I'm just picking up a few things to share with you. In recognition, it's that aha moment that finally somebody sees what you're saying, right? So, for instance, in discussions with BlackBerry 5 years ago, or with Nokia, when we were sitting and talking about the necessity of a platform for applications, they absolutely didn't believe that that was necessary, because the culture had been that as a mobile provider, we download the apps when necessary to people. So all of us BlackBerry users, remember, used to sit around on a Friday afternoon waiting for that app to come. Whether we liked it, didn't like it, there was no way to communicate. You either used it, didn't use it, wait another few weeks, maybe something else would come. In comes the world where in an Apple App Store model, there are over 1 million applications for you to use. Within the first few months, there were thousands. So that recognition in those discussions with BlackBerry and Nokia were missing, right? Those people didn't believe. But by the time they believed, unfortunately, if you recognize a little bit too late, sometimes it's very late. Because by the time BlackBerry recognized that it was time to change, too much of the market had been lost. So the gap between rejection and recognition can't be too long. Now, in your instance, because now we're going through this process, hopefully you've moved many people from rejection to recognition. Recognition isn't going to happen in the case of a startup with suddenly getting very large funding. It might be pieces of funding. You might have to go try out and come back. In a large company, you might be asked to do a prototype to prove your idea. but we need to help move people. So instead of being the victim in the process of this resistance battle, I propose that you view yourself as a coach, moving people through these processes based on the passion that you have. And whatever it is that you're driving, hopefully is something that you're very, very passionate about. The next stage, and I am on slide 18 now, is inspiration. Because when the aha moment happens and you're able to drive your idea forward and you're leading in what you're doing, hopefully in innovation, in startups, in a big company, that's really the moment of inspiration. You're going to be inspired. Everybody around you is going to be inspired. If you effectively and passionately lead in what you're doing, people are going to be absolutely passionate that when they're around you in that process. And finally, it's acceptance and action, which is when we move out. Now, in a startup, we have a lot less of this, right? Because we're fresh, we're new, we're coming out, we're daring, we're okay with experimenting, failing, moving on. But there's a different level of activity that we deal with. So as females in startups or smaller companies, sometimes really the problem is that you are outnumbered, because typically there'll be one woman engineer to maybe, in some of the companies I'm involved in, to 30 or 50 male engineers. So there is that issue. So, but hopefully you'll be feeling less of a female and more of a person that can push your idea forward and use your female as an asset. It's not really a bad thing to be 1 out of 50. Everybody knows your name. Everybody knows who you are. But in a bigger company, it really is important that if any of our participants and women attending Global Tech Women, and I know that Deanna has reached to a lot of big companies, there is structure, there is resistance, because there are big revenue lines. And if you're a female and you want to drive your idea forward, if you want to own a product line, if you want to get all the way up to running the strategy of the company, one of the things you've got to do is get comfortable that there are obstacles constantly, and that it is an obstacle chase, and you need to overcome those. And the less personally you treat these, the better it will become. So at this point, let me stop and see if there are any questions, thoughts that you want to chime in. Are you going to leave me alone? All by myself here? Okay, Deanna, give me a signal that we're good to go. We are. There you are. I see you. So I think the question that came in is, how do you get feedback when you get rejected? How do you turn into a positive experience? So the question is, how do you get feedback? You create a communication channel, as opposed to being you presenting somebody accepts it or not accept it. And I'm very happy for this question, by the way. Thank you. It is about creating a collaboration environment. When you're collaborating with someone, it's less of you presenting, them rejecting, and it's much more collaborative. And to do that, it's almost using the right words, as opposed to, I want to come in and present my idea, and then the person has to accept it or reject it. The phrase might be, I understand we need to evolve. We all agree we need to evolve. And I've come up with a number of ideas that I want to brainstorm with you. Let's pick the one that's going to win. So right there, you've changed the mode of communication. Everyone wants to collaborate. Everyone wants to move. And I'll tell you, in all honesty, companies, startups, medium, big companies, there is really not, it's not a gender issue. Companies are looking for people to grab things, to move it forward, to drive, to inspire people. So when you're rejected is the other question. It's not about you being rejected. It's about an idea that you shared that at that moment in that way did not get accepted. Or again, if you think about it in collaboration, it's kind of using, I'm so happy these words are being used, because these are exactly sometimes how we perceive them. It's about creating an environment of collaboration. And how do you turn it into a positive experience? Once you collaborate, hopefully you finish a meeting not as that person having accepted or rejected it, Rather, together, you set a plan that you're moving forward. So you're brainstorming, working together. Not everything is always going to be positive. Sometimes there's going to be absolute differences of opinion. And it's really great to have those differences of opinion because we're different as people. And if, frankly, everybody agreed, chances are what you're driving maybe wasn't that difficult to drive anyways. But if you want to really drive in leadership, if we want to have more women leading tech companies and having the positions in all levels that can inspire themselves and others, it's about looking at these as collaborations. It's about becoming super comfortable that not everybody's going to like my idea. That's okay. It doesn't mean they don't like me. They don't like the idea. Now, it is really true that sometimes women will feel uncomfortable, and there are circumstances that make them feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it's the frequency where these collaborations don't effectively happen. It's sometimes the duration, how long the woman has tried, the female leader has tried to push the idea forward, it hasn't happened. But I would really propose that we swap that frustration, that anger, that angst of I presented again today and it didn't get accepted, to sitting down with somebody, and if that's a person you need to collaborate with, saying, hey, this isn't really working. You and I need to find a way to do this. Charlotte says this might not be the right type question for this session. Charlotte, there's no wrong type of a question. Everything is cool. But I deal with marketing, and it can be a conversation killer saying that I'm directly responsible for a good portion of go-to-market strategy, positioning, messaging. Do I need to fight for another title to be taken seriously? You know, this is such a good question, Charlotte, because it is such a common phenomenon, right? When women feel they're not heard, when women feel that their ideas are not executed upon, they feel that, they're not taken seriously. So the issue isn't that you're not, because you're in charge of the global, go-to-market strategy for the company. So you're already taken seriously by virtue of the role that you have. The thing to ask is not to ask, perhaps, about whether you're taken seriously or not. Rather, ask a different question. How do I have to change what I'm doing to get the point across? Have the resolve what you're doing is correct. Find a different way to communicate it. When we start asking questions, why am I not being taken seriously? Why am I dealt with this way? These are a lot of victimization questions, right? It's automatically giving the control to somebody else. So learning how to fight differently is really an issue. And sometimes you do need to tell somebody who is perhaps not collaborating with you, or to use the term, they're not taking you seriously, is to say, you know what, I'm here to do an incredible job. This is my vision. These are the reasons. I want to hear yours. And before you and I leave this room, we're going to need to work together. So, but what's the real issue with women is that there's a tremendous discomfort with what will ensue, which is potentially a professional confrontation. A professional confrontation is two people having differences of opinion that have to resolve it to move forward. But it also means there are people that after that event need to be able to work together. Oftentimes in situations that I've dealt with, sometimes women leaders, they take the incident in a conference room very seriously. That impacts how they're going to react with that person later on. But if we're able to look at that as two people with differences of opinion, we're going to need to resolve this. And it could take a day or 2 days, but having that resolve and determination that you can push it forward. I hope I've answered your question, but please keep them coming, because this is really why we're here. We want to have these very candid discussions about all of these topics. So let me just return back to the presentation real quick. And Charlotte, I would love to connect with you anytime. I don't know, this is about 8 o'clock. I think we need to do this with a glass of wine. Okay, So let me get back to, I jumped forward in my presentation, and I need to finish up because we are going to run out of time, and I do want to make sure we talk about things and make sure. So I went through the stages of resistance, and on slide 21, I invite you to be a member of the culture of disruption, to be okay to drive things. And honestly, a lot of times with women is removing that self-doubt. It's in sort of replacing it with confidence, right? In the entrepreneurial world, one of the biggest difficulties with women founders isn't that they're not brilliant, that they don't have everything figured out, that you don't look at them and you're not absolutely certain they're going to get it done. But it's that oftentimes it's how the wording comes out. It's the determination that no matter what, you're going to go do this, that you're passionate about it. Yes, question of guys getting beers afterwards. Absolutely. Maybe it's beer, maybe it's whatever else, but it's having that confidence that you believe you're going to solve the problem. And that's really the issue. And finally, in addition to confidence, I'm sharing here with you on slide number 22, the ecosystem of disruption. Sometimes to deal with these difficult resistance issues, one, women need to have enormous confidence and be willing to exude that. Don't hold it back, no matter what. Second, it's about painting that bigger picture. When somebody's resisting about changing the product line or introducing disruption or wants to do business in 2014 as if it's 1999, you need to help them see the bigger picture, because today's ecosystem is market driven. It's driven by consumers. People have voices. So no longer can CEOs sit in a room, close their ears, and say, I'm not going to change, right? So use the ecosystem to your advantage. So at the moment that you feel you're about to explode because somebody's not being reasonable, calm down and infuse it with what's happening in the market. Remind them about competition and your resolve that you need to change it. So these are all the ingredients that you need to bring forward in order um, to solve the problem. Now, I want to bring up two more issues for discussion. One is that in leadership and in driving, being more in a driver position rather than a follower, it is about influencing, right? It's not just about my being convinced that something is right, but it's about influencing others to begin to believe in that and what you're trying to say. So in
I think we lost Linda. She was so passionate, I think she hit a button. Here she comes. Linda, are you there? I can't see you. If you can hear me, you might want to close your browser and get back in.
all right, are we there?
Yep, you're
Okay,
back.
perfect. So excellent, excellent. We never left. I was here. I was always here. I was with you. Trust me. Okay, so influence is one thing that I'd really like you to think about, but just internalize what that means, because the people that truly lead, that create change, they're able to influence others and change the thinking process of others. So that's something that I'd like to encourage that you think about. And the next one in leading is needing to be less worried about pleasing everybody around you. And I started out by saying leading is not about consensus. It's about doing what needs to be done. Women by nature were collaborative, but it is about not being worried so much about making sure that everybody likes your idea, but being able to at times say we need to change. And there is a cost to that, and not everybody's going to like your idea. And that's totally okay. And that's absolutely fantastic. So with that, I wanted to really in this session, I wanted to share some of these thoughts with you. So are there any other questions you want to discuss, talk about? I'm open to answer any questions you might have. So in closing, I would say that women are amazing leaders. However, the challenges of how do we lead as opposed to follow apply to men as much as they apply to women. There are resistances and things we need to get through. Women have unique features. We have unique qualities that makes us who we are. But one quality that we might want to modify is how we deal with situations that have to do with leadership and not to deal with them at a personal level. This is not about you as a person, it's about you in terms of what you can do. And if women just stop that trend and we're willing to change that, we will change the number of women we will have leading, the influence that women will have, and really be able to show the true power that women have. And with that, I'd like to thank Deanna and Global Tech Women and all of you women. And I also want to, right before this session, I found out about the Malaysian Airlines going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing that is missing 239 passengers. And for all of us that travel, we kind of know that news release that comes out. So sending them all of our good karma. We hope that the plane will be found. But with that, I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure, and bring my session to a close.
Linda, and yes, we all have the Malaysian airline in our thoughts. Our thoughts. I think many of us have been on that jaunt before, and we know those are weary travelers on that plane, and to be in a situation like that, it must be the worst kind of experience. So I'm wishing them well and their families. So they are in our thoughts today. So thank you, Linda. As usual, it is a very interesting conversation. You have a way of looking at situations so differently than so many women I talk to around the world, and it's great that women around the world have the pos the possibility of watching the session, and hopefully they will figure out ways to get your book and to watch your webcasts and hopefully see you speak in the future in their country.
Yeah, and I would only encourage all of the participants to continue being affiliated with Global Tech Women, Deanna, because you've been pushing this agenda of changing the landscape for women in technology to put more women into leadership. And I'm personally thrilled that you're doing this and opening up this channel of communication, which is extraordinary, by the way, in terms of having people from all over the world come together to have a uniform conversation. And I think that Global Tech Women could be the nexus, the hub of where we can have these future conversations. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm hoping that as people watch this, that they will think I should be speaking and I should be part of this next year, and that they will, in turn, take the plunge and speak on what they're passionate about, because we need many more voices in this global conversation. So thank you for stirring ideas and interests in how people can be fierce and transform the world. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Be fierce, nothing to lose. Thank you, everyone. Good night
Take care,
or
everybody.
good morning.
Bye.